event like this is made possible only by the support of many partners, and I'd like to take a minute to thank them all. The title partner is Yes Bank. Powered by partner is Facebook. Sustainability partner is Tata Steel. Power partner is Rabin. Infrastructure partner is GE. MA partner JSA. Digital partner Perfios. FinTech partner Clicks. Celebration partner Diageo. Country partner Ireland. And knowledge partner Bennett University. We now move on to other aspects of the changing world economy in terms of the sharing economy. And Calvin Coolidge once said, "No great enterprise can exist for itself alone. It ministers to some great need. It performs some great service, not for itself, but for others." Airbnb is a great example of the success of such service. It provides the largest number of rooms in the world without owning a single room. So everyone in the business knows Nathan Blecharczyk, the co-founder of Airbnb and the pioneer of online hospitality. He's here with us today to talk about a topic he knows inside out, the sharing economy. Talking with him is Guy Kawasaki, Chief Evangelist of Canva, who I remember from his time as Chief Evangelist of Apple. They'll be talking about what's next in collaborative consumption. Please welcome Nathan Blecharczyk and Guy Kawasaki.
It's been a long time since I've spoken to the audience. So many people were wearing ties. My goodness. So how's your room here?
Quite nice. Yes, yes. Staying with the host, he actually had 2 framed pictures of my co-founder in the apartment.
So you're not staying in the hotel, you're staying in an Airbnb?
Oh, of course, I should have said yes,
love
always
that.
an Airbnb.
Yeah, I love that. I've recently come up to speed on the history of Airbnb, and I just love the story of you guys and your, let's say, serial capital round. So how about you tell the audience about that story?
Sure. I mean, the early days, this was it's a very organic story, and you know, this was 10 and a half years ago. Back then, there wasn't the term sharing economy. We were frankly just solving our own problem, which was that the 3 of us co-founders back then were roommates in San Francisco. And suddenly the rent on our apartment was raised 25%. And I said, that's too expensive, I'm moving out. But my 2 co-founders wanted to stay, but they had just quit their jobs to become entrepreneurs, also known as unemployed. So they didn't have money to pay the rent, but they are designers, and they saw that an international design conference was coming to San Francisco, and they saw that all the hotels were sold out. So they decided, why not rent out the bedroom I had vacated to designers who might need a place to stay. Instead of calling it, the room had no furniture, had no bed, but Joe set up an air bed, and instead of calling it a bed and breakfast, he called it an air bed and breakfast. I'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
But they ended up hosting 3 designers for the weekend, made over $1,000, which helped pay the rent, and they all went to the conference together, had a really good time. Friendships were made. And it was out of that experience that, one weekend trying to pay the rent, that we thought to ourselves, maybe we can do this for other people, other situations. Let's try to make it just as easy to book someone's home as a hotel. So that was the idea. In retrospect, it sounds awesome. Back then, everyone told us that's crazy. How can you ever trust a stranger in your home? And really the first year was a bit of a disaster, which now segues into what you asked, the serial story. So getting towards the end of the first year, this is now fall of 2008, the recession had just begun. We had raised no venture capital money, and we were on the verge of quitting. We got an idea, or I should say my 2 design co-founders got a crazy idea to create a presidentially themed cereal, breakfast cereal. Why? Again, our name at the time was Air Bed and Breakfast, and the whole selling air beds and accommodations wasn't working out so well. So they thought, well, why don't we create a cereal, a breakfast cereal? And it'll be presidentially themed. They come up with this concept of Obama O's, which the tagline was Hope in Every Bowl, and then Captain McCain's, because John McCain was the other candidate that year. This is 2008. And the tagline was a maverick in every bite. And they created original artwork, and they created 500 of each box, and they mailed the first 100 of each box to political reporters with the hope that we would get publicity over this, because we figured, we email reporters, they delete the email. If they receive this thing in the mail, they would call us back. And sure enough, they did. We ended up being on Good Morning America, CNN. And so the first 100 boxes of each we had mailed out. The other 400 boxes of each we were selling on our website for $40 a box. And we ended up being the #1 political video of the day on CNN. And that day we sold a $40 box of cereal every 3 minutes until we sold out of the Obama O's. We made $30,000 in a week. And we like to joke, but it's half true, that we funded the company in the first year by selling cereal, because $30,000 is more than we made from our core business that entire year. So it's kind of a fun joke. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So arguably your first round was a C round.
Yeah, C round, yeah, cereal round.
Okay. I have to say that the topic of our panel here is the sharing economy. And if you had told me back then when you started, well, we're going to enable total strangers to rent a room in your house, and if you're the stranger, we're going to enable you to go rent a room from someone who might be a murderer. And I just wrapping my mind around it, how the hell did that work? Because if I were the renter, I would not trust where I'm staying. And if I were the owner, I would not trust who's renting. So how did that work?
And that's exactly the question everyone asked at the time. Exactly like that, pretty much.
Yeah.
And listen, I think we launched this at the perfect moment in time. There were really 3 original innovations to overcome that trust barrier. It was profile, payments, and reviews. So profiles was pretty straightforward. It's just that, next to each room was a very rich profile of who is the renter. Back then it was actually novel, because if you went on other vacation rental websites, if you went on Craigslist, at best you would see pictures of the property, but you never see who the owner is. Mm-hmm. And yet that's one way in which people establish trust. And so we had a very rich profile of who is the person behind the property. And of course, this is around the time, Facebook was really blossoming. And so people were actually, this was no longer the MySpace era, right? This was the era of truer identity, which Facebook kind of pushed. That was one. 2, the payments. So we acted effectively like an escrow service. Consumers would pay Airbnb. Airbnb would not pay the host until after the guest arrived. That way, if the guest needed to cancel, or if they showed up and something was not as described, they just had to call us and they could easily get their money back. But more importantly, the host realized that they had to deliver on expectations in order to get paid. So it really helped to align incentives. And that was really our role in the transaction, right? A very loose framework that aligned incentives so that scale could happen. The third thing was reviews, though. So after each day, the guest would review the host reviews the guest. And to this day, this is not a required thing, and yet the vast majority of guests and hosts leave voluntary feedback for each other. And this isn't simply 5 stars or A++. This is a paragraph of text describing the experience. So if you search on our platform and you look at the properties, you'll see dozens and dozens of reviews left by people who actually stay there. So this was the original innovation that started the growth. Of course, over time, we've improved upon this. Shortly thereafter, we came out with a $1 million guarantee that if your property was damaged, if anything was stolen, that we would make you whole on that. And so we created a real safety net. Of course, we have 24/7 customer support. We created a trust and safety team. Nowadays, we do a lot of sophisticated stuff behind the scenes, machine learning, to look at patterns, assign risk scores, trust scores, and for transactions that we might deem as suspect or more risky, we might ask the guest or the host to complete additional steps to prove their trustworthiness. So this system has evolved quite a bit, but it is the fundamental innovation that has allowed this very kind of strange idea to frankly become mainstream. So to date, we now have over 5 million homes in 191 different countries, and we've had nearly 500 million guests stay in other people's homes. So it's been a remarkable journey over the last 3.5 years.
Well, there's another element of trust, though, because the owner had to trust basically 3 people in a house in San Francisco holding his or her money until the end of the visit, right?
Well, no, the money was held by Airbnb.
Right. I mean, you,
Yes,
the 3 of you were Airbnb.
No, the 3 of us
Yes.
founders, yes. Well, it's funny because, I mean, obviously we don't present it like the 3 of us. Even in the early days, it was Airbnb or Air Bed and Breakfast. But a funny story is one of our hosts in the early days, we had a host meetup, and he was asking when he was going to get paid or something. And so Brian pulled out a checkbook out of his back pocket and just wrote a personal check. And indeed, actually, for the first year, all the payouts to the host were handwritten checks. And so, you know, it had a very modest beginning, and some people realized that it was actually just the 3 of us.
Well, I mean, since we're both from Silicon Valley, I think one of the lessons there is that you have to fake it till you make it. I mean, if they knew it was 3 people, right? I mean, writing checks, you might not.
You got to prove the concept, right?
Yeah.
It's the chicken and the egg problem, so you have to sometimes go out on a limb.
I also think there's an important lesson in what you've done in the sense that I meet many entrepreneurs and they have this lofty ideal of how to come up with a business idea, that it's because of some mega trend or some McKinsey-esque study. And really, it was the 3 of you trying to reduce your rent. I mean, it was like Steve and Woz couldn't get a personal computer, so they built their own. It's really simple questions. It's not this kind of highfalutin academic scientific study.
Yeah, you know, I think that's part 1 of the story. And then part 2 really was, you know, as this model scales, it brings up a lot of questions, right? The questions are things like, you know, what are the regulations around this? And of course, the answer is unknown, right? The regulations actually never contemplated something like this. And now we're at a point in time where we have incredible scale. 5 million homes, or 5 million rooms. That's more than, you know, any hotel chain or even the top 5 combined. We've had 500 million guests use it. All the countries and cities of the world are asking the question, you know, what should be the guardrails on this sort of thing? And so we're at this interesting point of time in the sharing economy, I think, as it matures, is establishing these protocols with some of the traditional stakeholders. And I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years. We've seen regulation passed in about 200 markets, recognizing home sharing, and by and large promoting it. We have tax agreements now with about 400 different jurisdictions where we help collect and remit hotel tax on behalf of cities. And we've actually collected nearly $1 billion that way. And so, you know, we're finding ways to make this not only an opportunity for guests and hosts and Airbnb the company, but also cities to put in the boundaries and also establish a business model whereby they profit by growth in this new sector of travel.
So for the sharing economy, in your case, to have worked, isn't it fundamentally, you know, one city or one state or one country regulations at a time? Aren't you doing hand-to-hand combat every day in the city, trying to get past the lobbyists and the unions and the government? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, you know, of course, every market's unique, so effectively, yes, every one is a bit of a one-off conversation. But, you know, they're happening at somewhat different times. And I think our attitude going into this is, you know, we're building a long-term business. And so, you know, government is an important stakeholder for a successful long-term relationship. So we want to keep it positive at all times. So, you know, we try to be as proactive as possible. We try to be as accommodating as possible. Every city or country kind of takes its own path in terms of how to arrive at decisions. But we offer up what we've seen in different jurisdictions. Sometimes we'll share data at aggregate levels. And we also try to map the business model to the local needs. So, you know, in India, for example, in 2017, we made a commitment to help train 50,000 hospitality entrepreneurs. Because one of the incredible things about the Airbnb business model is the people providing the homes, they're all individuals. And we think of those individuals as, frankly, micro-entrepreneurs, right? They're people who have now participating in the industry, the global industry of tourism. And so they effectively become an entrepreneur. And so this is something we can do, is promote entrepreneurship. And so we've made some local partnerships. One with Siwa, self-employed Women's Association, which has 2 million women members, particularly in rural areas. And actually, rural areas are really great for Airbnb because they offer really authentic experiences if you go there, but there isn't a lot of infrastructure. There aren't a lot of hotels. And so it's a great use case for Airbnb. We go out to these towns and villages, and we kind of train the local people about the opportunity and put them into business. So these are some interesting ways that you can take the business model and apply it to local issues that are really important to government and help them to see the potential.
So do you think the direction for you will be, more geographic locations, but the same business model? Or now will you apply this to cars and boats and airplanes? Are you a sharing economy company, or are you a hotel killer? I mean, what's...
I would say, frankly, neither really sums up the essence of it. I mean, we're an experience company, right? We're helping our travelers to have experiences, particularly ones that are local and personal, authentic, and we're doing that through accommodation, but also now activities. We call it experiences. But I would say, in terms of the different ways that we've evolved the concept, I mean, of course, we've expanded geographically. We're in 191 countries. We're the leader for what we do in each of those countries. So we've done a lot there, and we continue to invest, including here in India. We've also kind of gone up the value chain, and we really have a vision of Airbnb for everyone. We really think that everyone can be a customer. And that means, there are different segments, and we are tailoring what we do to those different segments now. So we just launched a product last year called Airbnb Plus. These are homes that are actually individually inspected to meet the highest quality of design and comfort. And it's really for kind of a more discerning audience. It's a slightly upmarket. We also have a luxury product. We acquired a company a couple of years ago called Luxury Retreats that has very high-end homes. We also have a business product. We call it Airbnb for Work. And that's proved very popular here in India. We have about 6,500 companies in India signed up for that. And so that's really good for employees who are on longer-term assignments. Think about like 1 week or even a month. It's hard to stay in a hotel for more than a week. It's expensive, and it's not maybe the best experience. It's nicer to have a home and feel a little more settled. So we see that as very popular too. And then the third area of expansion is into these different verticals of travel, such as our experiences product. We just announced a couple days ago that we made a key hire in the flights area. So we're going to do some innovation around flights, something very different.
Flights of private aircraft?
We haven't specified. All we've said is that we're not going to do what everyone else has done.
Okay.
Which means we're not going to start an airline and we're not going to sell tickets. But we care very much about the experience. We'll do something around that.
I'm a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, and I know that car sharing is a huge, huge source of change in our industry. That if you think about it, probably the car you and I own is used 2 hours a day, and 22 hours a day it's idle.
I try to never use it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, even more so.
It's being wasted, yes.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a natural, right? I mean, if you're gonna...
I mean, our focus, though, has been really around travel as a use case. I mean, we have this incredible audience. 500 million guests have used Airbnb to date. And thus we think about, how can we meet the other needs that community has. And so that's why we've focused around travel.
And today, is your business, is it somebody's renting a spare bedroom, or is it whole houses? I mean, what's the sweet spot today?
Right, and so it's evolved from that founding story of literally selling an airbed. That was the product, really, for the first year. And extra bedrooms, it's gone to be whole homes, which is the most common use case. But it's gone upmarket too, to villas and some of these luxury things I just spoke of, to also just incredibly unique things like tree houses and boats and islands and castles and yurts. You can find all that on Airbnb. And so, I mean, that's the power of a marketplace and a network, is that you can make all this stuff discoverable by the people who want it. And so every one of those 5 million homes is completely unique, and we like to say, therefore, you can find there's something there for everyone.
So do you have any lessons that we can pass on to any potential sharing economy entrepreneurs here, besides selling cereal to raise money?
I don't know if I'd recommend that as a path to follow more generally, but it did work out for us.
They could sell naan here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the business model is obviously very powerful, but behind it all, what makes it so sticky and successful, I think, is the people. I think that's underappreciated on the surface. If you've used the product, you understand, I think, that personal touch and the uniqueness that brings to the experience is really great. And so it's as much as a business model innovation as it is a social innovation. We talked about the need for fostering trust. But when trust is achieved and people are brought together, there's a certain emotional satisfaction that comes from that, where you basically open yourself up and then good things happen as a result. People leave that kind of thing transformed. And so I think that's what's really made this scale to where it is today. And so when you think about cars or anything else, I do think that social component is important to consider.
For this kind of economy, though, do you think the gating item is the landlord willing to share his or her property, or the traveler willing to stay in a stranger's home? Which is the
harder one?
The harder one.
The harder one is the landlord, the host, because actually, people travel, every year. Like it's a common use case, commonly understood. What was not commonly understood is that you would ever want to rent your home out by the night. Like that just wasn't happening. And so, that's what we've had to do is explain that opportunity and why would you want to do that and why it's, why it's safe to do that and, how it can be profitable to do that.
Are we being pulled off? I think we can no longer share our
Time is up.
Here.
We're over time by apparently 1 minute 44 seconds.
Well, thank you. I hope you learned something about the sharing economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Mr. Blecharczyk. Wonderful hearing from the founder of Airbnb. I've enjoyed their properties in Sri Lanka, even recently in Los Angeles, a city where I lived for 15 years. And I've enjoyed that greatly. These people are the real disruptors, The